When you have really good muscle health, you're going to have good nerve health. And the myokines are informing your nerves and the brain. And then the other thing that the myokines inform is the cardiovascular system. So when you have really healthy muscle mass, you've got to have good blood supply to handle the output of the heart. Lactic acid can actually be food for your muscles, but can also feel like concrete. And if you've ever experienced what lactic acid's like, it's when it's not just your muscles that feel really sluggish, but your brain can feel really sluggish after an intense workout. One of the most interesting things about thymosin beta-4 and BPC-157 is when you combine these peptides together, you're going to get a magnitude of about 10 times the recovery rate. Today, my goal is to show you some simple ways of reducing that burden and reducing that lactic acid threshold so that when you do work out, you can have a phenomenal ability to recover. I know last time we talked about the importance of muscle because your muscle is the largest organ in the body. And a lot of us just think of it more as a vanity metric, or you read the bodybuilder magazines, or we talked a little bit about the book Strong and by Joseph Gross, Dr. Joseph Gross, and Stronger, is the name of the book, but he used the historical context of what muscle is. But muscle, through peptides called myokines, informs your brain as far as your cognitive capabilities go, and how much neural density you need in your brain is reflective of the health of your muscles. The brain is also what's responsible for these neurons, and the neurons allow you to move, like I'm moving my hands, allow you to move your body. So the majority of your brain is really primed. When you have really good muscle health, you're going to have good nerve health, and the myokines are informing your nerves and the brain. And then the other thing that the myokines inform is the cardiovascular system. So when you have really healthy muscle mass, you've got to have good blood supply to handle the output of the heart and to be able to support the amount of muscle mass. And so the muscles are important for every single aspect of your heart as well. And so hopefully, on the challenge, the more muscle mass you build and muscle health, the greater your longevity will be. And so today, what we're going to be jumping into is how to recover. And so I'm going to have a pop quiz for you guys, and it's going to be on recovery. So how many of you get delayed onset muscle soreness? And I'll be right back. Got a lot of noise around me there. That's so much better. How many of you get the delayed onset muscle soreness is when you work out and it's not the next day, but it's 2 days later where you get really sore? How many of you take longer now to recover than you did 6 months ago or a year ago? And then how many of you notice that you get brain fog when you push yourself really hard in an exercise routine or class? And these things are really important, because if you answered yes to any of those, then there's some things that you can do to help your body recover. So there's this sugar in our body and this acid called lactic acid. And lactic acid can actually be food for your muscles, but can also feel like concrete. And if you've ever experienced what lactic acid's like, it's when it's not just your muscles that feel really sluggish, but your brain can feel really sluggish after an intense workout. And so today, my goal is to show you some simple ways of reducing that burden and reducing that lactic acid threshold so that when you do work out, you can have a phenomenal ability to recover. And so one thing I want to start with today is to show you a really exciting case study on one of our clients who lost an enormous amount of his DEXA scan. I'll pull this up, but he lost an enormous amount of visceral fat and total fat. And the great thing on his body composition is he looks like a different human. So how many of you have done a DEXA scan before? And I think hopefully, you guys probably are very aware of what a DEXA scan is, but it's imaging through an X-ray machine. I'm trying to pull this slide up, but one of our clients, he went and he's been working with us for 2 years. And what he had is in his total weight loss, he had 11.1 pounds. And you may be saying, okay, 11.1 pounds, it's nothing to write home about, right? But then as we go through the data and as you see what, the actual, you look at the numbers and it's actually very, very impressive because when you look at the visceral fat, he lost quite a bit of visceral fat, but I'm going to pull up this slide so you guys can see it, but I've got to extend this a little bit. There we go. So here comes, I'll share my screen with you. This is pretty exciting. So you could see his body before on the DEXA scan. And what he did is over the course of 2 years, he went from 231 down to 220, total decrease 11.1 pounds, but his body fat percentage dropped by 15%. He went from 34% of his total body weight being body fat down to 18.9%. And this is a 58-year-old man. And his fat muscle mass, he went from 76 pounds of fat mass down to 42 pounds, which is almost a 34-pound drop. And here's the kicker. On his lean tissue, he went from 147 pounds to 181 pounds, almost a 34-pound gain in lean tissue. And when we say lean tissue, that's your muscles, your tendons, your ligaments. That is an incredible amount of muscle. I mean, that's essentially 16 pounds every single year of muscle mass. I mean, that's like unheard of. And his visceral pounds, like I mentioned, he lost almost a pound of visceral fat, which is really important because now he's 4.9 pounds of visceral fat. And so that's the importance of muscle. But the way that we got him there is we use different peptides. And one of the peptides that we love using to help recover is BPC-157 and TB-500. And these are really important peptides because what BPC-157 is it's the BPC stands for body protective complex, and it activates nitric oxide. It also helps you get better blood circulation throughout your muscles. And so it's derived from human gastric juice. It has been shown in clinical studies to help repair leaky gut. It also helps with inflammation. It's really powerful if you inject it into like tendons, like for tendonitis, works really well. And then with BPC, if you want to increase its effectiveness, you'd want to add in a peptide called thymosin beta-4. And in some cases, you would add in TB-500. And TB-500 is just a fragment of thymosin beta-4. And so what thymosin beta-4 does is it promotes any kind of stem cell regeneration. It reduces inflammation and accelerates recovery. And so here's the interesting thing about this. In the clinical studies, what they found is when there was a tendon severed, they found that by utilizing this TB-500, they found that there was a greater proliferation of stem cells into the damaged area. They also found that there was a greater level of recruitment of what's called VEGF, or vascular endothelial growth factors. And they found that the repair time in the rodent models, at least, they found that the reparative time was almost cut in half. So you have about 100% greater repair. In the BPC-157, this peptide is 15 amino acid chains, and it does show promise in wound healing, reduction of inflammation. It helps support GI health, but it also, they've done several studies with muscles, tendons, and joint recovery. One of the most interesting things about thymosin beta-4 and BPC-157 is when you combine these peptides together, you're going to get a magnitude of about 10 times the recovery rate. And when I first started using these, I used to get really severe brain fog, and I would get delayed onset muscle soreness, the DOMS, and I was doing a CrossFit training when I first got into peptides, and I was training with Chris Spieler up in Park City, and we would do these insane workouts, and I would feel great the next day, but it was like 2 days later where it was so hard for me to function. And I realized like then, I ran my genetics system about 15 years ago, and I was like, oh, I've got the MTHFR and MTRR and CALM-T and had all these variants. I'm like the Wolverine. Or not the Wolverine, but I'm like an X-Man with everything, distorted. And so when I started using the thymosin beta 4 and BPC, I didn't have the soreness. And I was like, this is magical. I felt so good. And so I don't know if any of you have experienced that, but what you'll notice is when you use these, the reason why it helps you recover so quickly is because we've mentioned this on the show before, but the recovery and the benefits of working out does not come when you're lifting weights. That's actually when you're doing damage to your body. And you say, well, how could doing damage to the body be good for me? But actually, when you break down the muscles, they come back as a stronger, more solid unit. And so this vascular regeneration, and this is what they discovered in the work that they did with this, with the thymosin beta 4 and BPC-157, they found that there's angiogenic factors. You also find that the arteries are more proliferative. There's vasculogenesis. So even in the nitric oxide production, you'll see vasodilation. We've seen plaque regression. And then from the transdifferentiation, it activates stem cells that become these satellite stem cells. And then those satellite stem cells trigger the release of skeletal muscle stem cells. So you break down the old and you build up these new, healthier versions in your body. And this is one of the reasons why you notice if you've had a strained muscle or if you overdo it and you've got all this inflammation, well, one of the things that happens is if you don't recover from that inflammation, you can actually get weaker by working out. And so by using thymosin beta 4 or TB-500 with the BPC-157, you'll notice that your muscles have more elasticity. Your flexibility will improve. Your mental function improves. And this is really exciting because these peptides, they naturally exist in your body. And what they do is they just go in and remind your body how to recover. Some of the other things you can do to help facilitate this process is by drinking a shot of beet juice. And if you do it like in the morning, I just have this fermented beet juice that's pretty tasty. And I just take a shot of that in the morning before my workout. And then in the evening, either before or after dinner, take a little shot of beet juice. And it's a really great way of keeping nitric oxide production improved. When you're detoxifying from a heavy workout, it can be one of the most devastating things where you don't want to work out again, especially if you have an autoimmune condition or if you're more prone for delayed onset muscle soreness. And so one thing I like doing is the cold plunge. And yes, it's not easy to get into the cold plunge, but sometimes just 2 minutes in the cold plunge, 3 minutes, whatever you feel like you can do makes such a difference. I was talking to one of our clients today and she said, the thing I like about the cold plunge, I'm so glad you got me into it. It took her a long time to come around to it, but she said, after I get out of there, after like 3 minutes, I just feel so good. Like I can accomplish anything. And she said, I had a bunch of her girlfriends, and I think maybe her sister was there. And she said, we just had this weekend get together with about 8 different women, and we all did cold plunging. And when I reflected back and I just asked everyone, I was like, what was your favorite part of the weekend? And without hesitation, they all said cold plunge. So cold plunge is great because it vasoconstricts things. So you want to have this nice movement, vasodilation, vasoconstriction. And the other thing that's really good for that delayed onset muscle soreness, do I exercise after it? Do you want to exercise over sore muscles? And you don't, but you don't want to be sedentary either because you want to activate that lactic acid so that you can metabolize it. And so one of the things that happens when you start moving your body is now you can start metabolizing that lactic acid and you'll notice your muscles feel so much better quicker. And so the types of exercise you want to do is that's a good time to do like zone 2 training. I found I can get on my bike, my gravel bike, and just ride, maybe for an hour. And I just feel so much better because I'm breathing. In that respiration cycle, you'll have a lot of release of carbon dioxide. And when you're breaking down your muscle, it puts a huge burden on your liver, and the liver loves movement. So I'll make sure I stay nice and hydrated, get my mineralized water, and just really start getting into that zone 2 phase. The other thing that's really beneficial is if you have a foam roller, just jump on the foam roller, work out the muscles. You want to elongate the muscles, do a really nice stretching. Today was my Pilates purgatory day. So Pilates is so good for your muscle because you slow it down. And this is how you can get your muscles to recover. And when your muscles recover, your whole body feels better. And the other thing you want to do is you want to work on fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers, especially for those of you who love sports. I know we have a lot of mountain bikers, big time hikers here. We have a couple of you who are training for triathlons, which you know who you are. And I tell you, be careful, because when you do those big, crazy races, especially when you do the Ironman in Kona, I know, you're working on qualifying for that, which is impressive, but you want to make sure that the oxidative stress is minimized as best as possible. And so that's where, the days where you cycle on to fast twitch muscle fibers, where you're actually working out at a shorter amount of time, but you're really pushing high intensity. When you fluctuate your workouts, instead of just doing the long distance workouts, which is kind of the standard in endurance running and endurance races, you want to actually have more of these short bursts where you're really maximizing your output for shorter periods of time so that your body can recover, versus doing like the 2-hour runs and 3-hour bike rides and long swims. And then adding in these peptides to do so well. So when it comes to hypertrophy with the muscles, the first thing you want to do is it's that release. So ipamorelin, you get that growth hormone release. That's going to help your body in the recovery. It enhances the fat loss. Peptides like tesamorelin, other peptides that boost the growth hormone pathways for muscle is like hexarelin, sermorelin. And by the way, anytime you're doing BPC-157 and you're turning on the nitric oxide pathways and you're helping your body recover, it's the growth hormone that really gets kicked in. And so you'll, just like when you stack BPC and thymosin beta 4, when you add in a growth hormone, you'll see another magnitude of 10 amplified when it comes to your body's recovery. Combining those, you can even use sermorelin. But one of my favorites is the IGF-1. IGF-1 LR3 is such a good peptide because the recovery feels great. It's one of the strongest growth hormone releasing peptides. IGF-1 is the workhorse for growth hormone. And so you just feel really good. But maybe I'd love to hear from you if you're open to it. But how many of you have a favorite growth hormone peptide? Maybe you like sarcotropin, or maybe you notice hexarelin, the oral, maybe those are your favorite, or tesamorelin or CJC. CJC-1295 is the one that makes you flush a little bit, and it feels like really like a niacin flush and stimulating. Or maybe you're like me and you like IGF-1. And I do. I don't use IGF-1 more than 3 or 4 cycles a year, but then I shift up with tesamorelin, ipamorelin, or CJC or hexarelin. So good to shift them up. But yeah, what are your favorites? But one thing we find with the BPC, with the growth hormone, when you look under imaging, what you'll see is they work on the nervous system. So your brain, the spinal cord, even the myelin sheath around the nerves are better protected. You'll notice in the muscle tissue, the cardiac muscle, the smooth muscle, skeletal muscle, all these things are improved by using the BPC, thymosin beta 4 with the growth hormone peptides. You'll see in the epithelial tissue, like the lining of the gut and the other hollow organs, the skin surface, everything improves. You'll have better cell turnover. And you'll also, the tissue structures look younger after using these peptides for just 30 days. You'll notice in the connective tissue, you'll have better fat distribution. You'll have stronger bones, healthier tendons. And then one of the things that's very interesting in the connective tissue is that when you start utilizing these recovery methods, you'll notice that your tissue actually has more flexibility and pliability. You'll notice as we get older, that's what sarcopenia is when our muscles, they get rigid, and then our blood vessels get rigid. and you just don't have the movement structure that you once had. And this is, the biggest thing is if, one of the clients I just met with before this, he's got his dad that just moved in, and his dad is in his 80s. He's 64, but his dad's about 25 years older than him, and a little older than that. I guess he's 28 years older. I think he's 82 is what he said. But he said, man, my dad does not want to do anything. He just sits. And so he said, I've got my dad out to do, he's got like a putting green on it at his house. And he's like, I've actually got him to walk out and do the putting green. And now he's thinking about that more. And if I can get him to go walk down the stairs and walk around the pond, that, and he said, every day that his dad does something, he's like, it doesn't take much, but a little bit of movement, my dad's actually coming back to life. And so if you think movement is healing your whole body, that's the beautiful thing about, us being in a physical body, having a spiritual experience, is movement is that great gift that we all have. And by protecting your muscles and properly recovering, you can do a lot of good for yourself in the future. And that's what the Ageless Future is all about. It's about living your best today because you have this ageless future to look forward to, where you don't have to think about being in your 80s and not doing anything. I mean, we have clients who are getting stronger and stronger every year, and they're in their 80s, and it's really fun to see. I mean, even Charles Euster, who I've spoken about a lot on the Hacks, which he was a retired dentist, and he took up bodybuilding at the age of 85. He took up sprinting competitions at the age of 95, and he broke all these world records. And people asked him, like, how does it feel to break a world record? And he said, well, the older I get, the less competition there is. And so he said, yeah, it doesn't mean as much as if there were a lot of people that were competing, but still impressive. And so the self-renewal process, when you look at your body in this turnover, as you're exercising, as you're working your body more, you really have to think detoxification, because if your liver's not working properly, you're going to have proteins that build up. You're not going to denature them. It's going to be really hard to build muscle. And, think of exercise as injuring your body. I mean, you're breaking down tissue. And so what we're doing is helping you build back even a stronger foundation because of what you went through. And it's kind of like a moth. When a moth is trying to get out of its cocoon, and if you mistakenly think you're going to help the moth, or a chicken, a little chick who's trying to break through the eggshell, and we think, oh, let's make it easier for these creatures to experience life and get out of their confinement. Let's remove the friction and the barriers. And then what you'll notice is the moths never gain the strength to be able to flap their wings and fly. Same thing with the chicks. They never actually have that power, and then they don't go into full maturation. And so it's the same thing in our body. If you don't move it, the law of entropy sets in, and we start losing this ability. And so some of the ways you can cycle this, we like cycling BPC-157, thymosin beta-4, or TB-500. You can do anywhere from 250 to 500 micrograms daily. TB-500, you can do the same. You can do it twice per week, then once per week. I like to do them both simultaneously. I find it works really well. You'll notice that it helps with fatigue. It's immunomodulating. It helps mask pain. It helps with angiogenesis. And then one of the things you want to do is make sure that, on these, they can be used frequently. And actually, if you go oral versus injections, that's a way you can stay on these without overstimulating the pathway. But also make sure that you add in a growth hormone releasing peptide. It can be really good for you. So I'm going to ask you, what were your takeaways from today, and how many of you would like to recover better? And what are going to be the main systems, the main therapies that you do? And so I think that is something that, you want to ask yourself right now is your recovery as effective as it could be? And the way that you can quickly gauge that question is just finding out, like, well, are you able to work out the next day? Do you notice it takes longer? Are your hormones optimized? These are all really important things. But the big thing you can do from a daily perspective is your muscles are about 73% water. And so the more you can hydrate, getting the minerals in that you need, the better your muscles will be. And no, you're not recovering if you get any kind of cramping. So make sure that you're massaging your muscles, you're loosening them up. And then the other thing you want to look at in your recovery is, are you obsessed to the point where you can't take a day off of exercise even though you need to? And I fall into this category where I am, I probably do more harm than good on certain weeks because I have a training protocol that I have in place. As you know, I've got 2 more weeks before my big VO2 max revealed. So I see what kind of progress I've made. And I don't like missing my protocol, but I'm trying to learn that, there's times to pull back. And so that's where you want to look at if you use an Oura ring, or like me, I use a Garmin watch, maybe use an Apple Watch, but you want to look at your heart rate variability. You also want to look at your total sleep scores. If you notice your sleep is just getting worse, or you're not getting enough deep sleep or REM sleep, it will pay dividends just to give yourself a little better recovery time. There's also on the Garmin, the body battery score, and that's a really important one to look at. But generally speaking, if you want to increase your time to recover, BPC, thymosin beta-4, growth hormone peptides are the best thing that we've seen. And then what you can do to optimize your recovery is make sure you're using foods that stimulate nitric oxide, like beets, arugula, and then make sure you're getting adequate levels of protein. 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight is really ideal if you're looking to build muscle. And then 1 gram of protein per kilo is, if you're in Australia, then that's going to be the proper ratio for you. And then for those of you who don't digest proteins very well, make sure you have, digestive enzymes. Take betaine hydrochloride, apple cider vinegar, so that you're activating the stomach acids. And then 1 day out of the week, give your liver a break. Your liver has to denature all these proteins. So go on a protein fast where you do maybe like 50 grams to 100 grams of protein, and eat more vegetables, more fruits that day. And you'll find that you just feel really good. So appreciate you guys. Your challenge for this week is do one thing to help your body recover, whether that's foam roller, get a massage, get on a Pilates class, yoga class, and let me know how it goes. And appreciate all the great positivity you guys bring. And I will see you next week.